Hello. Oh, okay.
Hi.
That was very extended. Um, so today I'm kind of interested in hearing more about your parents' journey when escaping Vietnam. I thought it would be interesting to like share with everyone
Okay.
because it is quite different, and most of us like never really needed to experience that.
Mm.
Yeah, unless you're the Syrian?
Syrian refugees.
Yeah, Syrian refugees, which is very unfortunate.
Mm.
But yeah, I was talking to Tony before that like all the hardships that pretty much people needed to go through, like mostly our parents or like our grandparents already went through it with like for us. And then we never really needed to experience such difficulty in life.
Mm.
Yeah, just to have like a normal, I guess you can say like a quote unquote normal life here.
Mm.
Mm.
So, okay, I guess I'll start then.
Yeah.
Okay, so, I think I've told you, I don't really, one thing I guess is maybe it's because my parents grew up around a lot of Vietnamese immigrants, so I never really felt their story was, like, particularly, I don't want to say particularly special because I mean, it is in comparison to everything we've been through, but it's more
Mm-hmm.
like it's a story and a history that
It's special in this era,
yeah,
pretty
it's a
much.
story and history that a lot of like the kids I grew up with and their parents went through as well. So it's like I guess it's one of the things you don't really consider it like it's just becomes a part of your history,
Mm.
but like it's like in well, I guess in the context of like when you tell other people, like then they have the shocked look on their face,
Yeah.
and then I guess you realize that really it's mainly just it's because you grew up hearing it for so long that maybe like the effect is numbed a bit for you, but like at the same time though you do realize like as you get older that like how such a staggering like period of time it was. So I guess for context, my parents are one of those. I guess it's like the boat people. Like I think that's like the term that most people use.
Was there
In
like other ways people escaped that
yeah,
were
money.
effective? Yeah, money, but like
But no, that was it.
yeah, right?
Yeah, like my parents were one of the like boat people that escaped from Vietnam and to the most common. I think and I could be completely incorrect in this, but as far as I know, everybody escaped to Hong Kong
Mm-hmm.
because at the time it was under British control, so you could like get refugee status back then. If you hit, and it was technically not under Chinese control at the time, so like that's why everybody aimed to get to
Hong
Hong
Kong.
Kong.
Mm-hmm.
Now I could be mistaken that there are other destinations as well. Those that's just the one that
That your parents
yeah,
went through.
and that's the one that I know about for all the rest of my parents' friends.
Yeah. For just because I've had some of these questions before, like some people thought I was Vietnamese. Maybe it's because of your name or something.
Mm.
But I'm from Taiwan and then Tony's Vietnamese.
Mm.
So for my side it was my grandparents had to escape China during the war, like when Kuomintang left China to go to Taiwan. So I don't. I'm not like my. I tried to ask my dad more about it, but then like he said like his mother never really expanded more on that. Like it was mostly just like pretty much gave us some information. But then I think your parents talked more
Yeah,
about their adventure
yeah. I
pretty
guess
much.
my parents ever since my dad always told like my parents were both a bit like your parents I guess in the early years of my life.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of told me like the historical facts, so they didn't really go into too much detail. And to be honest, it was actually only in like the last year
Mm.
of everything since my mom passed away that my dad's kind of really started telling me a lot more
Mm-hmm.
of like I guess maybe he felt one day he would tell me when, but I guess maybe since that
When the
happened,
time's right.
yeah, since that happened, I guess my dad feels his time's more limited, so he wants to share everything he can with me.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I'll sort of just start at the
Yeah.
beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So my dad and mom were from northern Vietnam, and before they were married, when my dad was still, like, I guess he would have been I guess technically a teenager at the time.
Mm.
Both my mom and my dad grew up during the era of like the Vietnam War, with the South and the U.S. bombing the northern capitals. So my dad's earliest memories that he like shared with me relatively recently, that he remembers when the bombs came, is like, as the older kids, like they were kids back then, one of their jobs was to help clear bodies from the rubble. So like,
Was your dad like 16?
yeah, around that time, yeah. I mean, I think he had left school already, so
Yeah.
so that was one of my dad's earliest memories, of growing up during the wartime, and he remembers that he always in the neighbor it was really terrible, because like, since you lived in that neighborhood, when you were clearing rubble, you would be clearing away, hoping not to find your neighbors in the rubble, like people you grew up with. So it was rather like tragic time.
You have to kind of mentally prepare yourself every person you uncover.
Yeah, and actually, my dad did tell me a lot about some other things just from his early times. Like, to be honest, my dad probably has more of these stories. Like, I won't hear much about my mom's stories, but mainly because she grew up in a more privileged family that only suffered after the communists took over. So after Vietnam closed its ties. So my dad, if it seems I'm very geared towards my dad's sides of the stories from back then, it's mainly because he talks about it more and because he has more. But there is one from my mom's side. But I guess my dad. So my dad told me that one thing that a lot Vietnam wasn't very like. I mean, it's still kind of stuck backwards, but like, it was a lot worse back then. So he told me how when he was younger, like, a lot of the kids, because of the shortage of supplies coming in and out, there would be a lot of times when like him and his brothers wouldn't have anything to eat. So one thing he told me was that like the communist government really took care of the widows of the patriots that like supported the party. So there was this older woman. Her husband had long since passed on, but because her husband was the closest word for it is patriot, because he had like fought and died for them. The government always like went out of their way to make sure they took care of her. So she actually had, in the times when there was like a lot of shortages, it was like she had quite a lot more than she needed. But because of her husband, and that they would take care of the widows of the patriots. So she would take that, all the extra things she got, and like make sure that like the kids in the neighborhood where my dad grew up would have like enough. Like, I mean, it wasn't, when you spread out even one person's big share, it's not enough, but it's something she helped with, because she said she was old and she didn't need to eat all this good stuff. Like, so that was just another memory my dad shared with me. And when I went back to Vietnam when I was 14, luckily I was able to meet her before she passed on. She was being taken care of, and like they always took care of her. Like, she didn't have like a big house or anything like that, but she had a home, and she always had somebody taking care of her. So my dad made sure I knew who she was. So when I met her, she didn't need to. She was, I guess at that point, she was quite old at the time, too. So I'm not sure she even remembers all the things she did. But my dad remembers, so he made sure I saw her.
That's the important part, right?
So I guess around the time my dad was like 18, 19, he was conscripted into the Northern Communist Army, and it was a conscription. You have to go. They tell you you're going. You're going. It was a duty to serve.
Didn't you say there were like some families like they didn't want their kid to go through it, so then they shot them in the foot or something?
No, that was actually a North America. That was actually a World War II thing here.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it was actually a common practice that like I learned about. I think it was in university that a lot of like a lot of people, to make sure they weren't fit to serve,
Mm-hmm.
they would shoot themselves foot because like you have a foot injury, so you
So
can't.
so in Vietnam, like even if
Oh,
something
I'm
like
sure
that
there are
was-
people that did, but like to be
Mhm.
honest, if you had money, you probably could have gotten out of it.
Mm-hmm. So it's just like it's quite skewed. Pretty
Yeah,
much.
exactly. But anyways, but it was a duty to serve, so
Yeah.
he did. So he did it. So he went. So we went to basic training, and now this was, the war had been going on for some time. My
Mhm.
dad wasn't one of the first conscripts. He was actually conscripted probably. I guess it would be into the late days of the war.
Mm-hmm.
So like he wasn't there from the very beginning, but the clashes had been going on for some time
Mm.
at that time. So my dad he went to training, and one of those stories he told me recently
Mm.
was that in Vietnam there's a trail between the north and the south.
Mm-hmm.
It's called the Ho Chi Minh Trail,
Mm.
which essentially is like a forested path way that to transport goods from the north to the south and vice versa.
Mm.
Now, this was a primary supply route for that the armies used, and since the U.S. knew about that, they utilized a weapon called Agent Orange,
Mm-hmm.
which was a gas weapon that burned away the foliage, so that you could. So essentially, that the practicality behind that was, if the army can be, if they can be seen, they can be attacked by helicopters, which was the primary
Yeah.
advantage that the South had, was that they had the support of U.S. military helicopters
Mm-hmm.
that could do flyby attacks.
Yeah.
I mean, it's quite well documented. But
Mm-hmm.
so my dad, one thing my dad told me is like, yeah, they did that, and
Mhm.
I mean, from a practical standpoint, it makes sense. But he's like, when people want to survive,
Mm.
you don't know, they don't get what people are willing to crawl through
Mm.
to like get down.
Like when you said like did he actually mention a few examples or?
Well, like people will crawl through, like they burned away the shrubs, but like
Mhm.
the trees are dead. But like people, my dad's like, it's forest. Unless you want to deflame away the entire forest, you
Yeah.
can crawl through Agent Orange dead trees, or you can
Mm-hmm.
like just literally cut to the side and cut through completely new trails.
Mm-hmm.
That's why the Ho Chi Minh Trail is the way it is. I mean, it's how all roads are the way they
Yeah.
are. You just keep going
Mhm.
and cutting your way through the forest. So my dad, he recently told me a lot actually about other things as well. Like he said the worst thing for him, and I will never have pretended to go to war, but like so I can't even begin to relate to what he
No,
described it.
I mean, like a lot of these situations at the time, they don't even have a choice. It's like you either go or like the rest of your life in that country, you're like you're a traitor, and then like a lot of things you pretty much can't live there anymore practically.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
like my dad was explaining how like when they're organized into the army, they organize them by like the streets people grew up on. Like in Vietnam, like it's like the neighborhoods you grew up in. It's like it's a lot. It's very tight knit
Mm-hmm.
by communities. Like it's called Teng Pho, which means like just street.
Yeah.
So like it's just like the streets you grew up on. Like it's like neighborhoods that people grew up with. So they just, when they're organizing people, I guess they just organize them by people from the same neighborhoods together for probably practicality reasons. So, but like my dad was describing how like the worst part of was waiting for when like either a bomb would drop or like you had, or before you would have to get engaged on
Mm-hmm.
and like enter a fight. But like when you're in the fight, it passes by like quickly, but like it's the
Mhm.
waiting for it. But he says the worst part of it was after the fighting, when you would look over and then find out people you grew up with were like had died in that fight or in that bombing. So he says that was honestly the worst part of it. Like
Mhm.
if he as he remembers the days of the war. But anyway, so not to drag on too long, but my dad was describing how he managed to get to South Vietnam, so to like the southern capital, in the dying days of the war. So the Americans had already pulled out and left the southern forces to kind of fend for themselves. Partially that my dad understands he's quite lucky to have survived that, because he got to come like near the end, but near the end when the fighting had died down quite a bit and the intensity was a lot less. So he finds himself quite fortunate. So he got to he got to survive that and go back home after they had finished securing the South.
Mm.
But anyways, that's neither here nor there of my dad's time. So both my parents escaped Vietnam on a boat. So essentially, this is actually a discussion I had with my dad.
Mm.
He was like saying like if he had asked any of his relatives or friends that didn't go,
Mm.
and they asked, and like 10 out of 10 if you'd asked 10 people, 10 of them would have told him and my mom they were crazy, like are you insane? Because they actually had a very good life in Vietnam. They had their own businesses. They had people working for them. They had their own shop. They had good income. They had a home and everything. But they had an opportunity to get educated and like and everything. But and like at the time, my mom was a few weeks pregnant with me. At the time, she had a year prior she had lost her first child, and the first child was stillborn. So
Was it just because of the condition?
no, it was just unlucky, to be
Oh,
honest.
I
It was
see.
just unlucky. My dad was describing that like his one of his guys had like come running to him when at the shop, and he told them like big sis needs you right now, and like again because my mom always like came by and like visited my dad and his guys at work. So
Yeah,
then my
yeah.
dad came running. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. But like they described like 10 out of 10 people have told us we were crazy.
Well, because you can lose your life very easily.
Exactly, and they had everything to lose, and they had a good life. But my dad, I kind of like was able to like kind of explain to my dad, but like, you see, 10 out of 10 people would say you're crazy because those 10 out of 10 people would never leave. But here's the thing, you knew enough. It's like you knew there was something wrong with the country. Like it's like you couldn't put it into words, but like when you were younger, you knew there was just something wrong with the country at the time. I mean, at the time you didn't really have the way of putting it into words, but you knew. Now we know it's the corruption, like how stagnant everything became for them. Like what you earned became part of the government's type thing. It was like corrupt. So, but at the time, my dad didn't really have to put in words. But he just knew. It's like, but you understood because you were fortunate enough to have an education that there was just something wrong. So they took off one day. They just they sold everything they could without raising suspicion, and all for gold, and for like portable foods. And then the night they went, they just met at the beach and with a person they paid already, and like a whole bunch of other people like met too, and then like they just hopped on the boat and they were out of the water. They were out on the water for a month.
That's so crazy. I mean, like how did they do that all secretively and everything?
Very secretly. They didn't tell anybody, like not even their
Because like,
parents.
wouldn't you see like like, huh?
Well, they didn't tell anybody. That was the
Yeah.
thing. Like, and that was actually my dad's biggest thing was that my dad was very close to my grandfather,
Yeah.
like his dad, and at the time when he did it, he couldn't tell anybody. So
Yeah.
to my grandfather, my dad's leaving felt very much like a betrayal. Yeah, but like I mean, after many years, and when Vietnam finally opened itself up again, like it was many years later, but when they finally opened up communication and people, and they allowed, like they said that the people that escaped, they were allowed to come back, not as citizens, they were allowed to visit, they wouldn't be arrested.
Yeah.
Actually, interesting story about that. One of my parents' friends they grew up with, he also escaped a few years before my parents, and he was actually the first person
Yeah.
out of my parents' group to go back to Vietnam and visit his family.
Oh.
And his wife every day was like panicked, like standing by the phone because she thought because this is what they remembered of Vietnam,
Yeah.
how strict the government was, and that they said all the people that escaped were now exiled. They're criminals. They can never come back. If they come back, they will be arrested
Yeah.
and tried. So she was.
That's what she remembered.
Yeah. So like she was like beside herself every
yeah.
day. Like her friends were constantly over. She was just waiting by the phone, like expecting to hear that her husband had landed in Vietnam. He'd been arrested, and like he was going to be tried as a traitor. Like because like they just didn't trust the government.
Yeah.
At the time, because he was one of the first ones to go back. But like in the end, like my mom and dad described like the phone call she got when her husband called her from Vietnam and said, no, fine here with the grandparents,
Yeah.
seeing my brothers and sisters, so it's all fine. Like they said, her relief was like it was just unmatchable because like it was
Yeah.
like a legitimate fear.
Mhm.
But I guess that's the thing. Even though you leave a place, it's still your home, so you want to go back to it if you
Yeah,
can.
you want to see your family.
Mhm.
Mm.
But so my parents, they hopped on the boat, and it was 1 month on like this tiny little boat to like the port of Hong Kong, and legit, and like my parents were lucky. Like you hear stories that like people were attacked by like ocean pirates, and like they would just board, and like because people would essentially they were giving up their entire lives, so they would carry like gold
Yeah.
and like valuables
Anything
with
they
them
can.
with them that they could trade or like start a new life in Hong Kong or wherever they ended up. So it was, my parents were lucky they didn't have to, they didn't end up, that didn't end up happening to them. But like it was legitimately like they ran out of water, like you had to like drink what you could.
Yeah.
And like by the time they got to like just like a few miles out from Hong Kong, a military boat like
Oh,
came
shit.
out at them, and like they didn't know what was going on, because like I mean you can't get prepped for this, like you don't know what to expect. You just know if you get on a boat, if you make it to Hong Kong, you'll be okay.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, this was rumors. Like there was no way of confirming. Like you just hear, oh, so and so's like cousin did this, and like they were able to get out okay. But how did they know that they were able to get out okay?
Yeah.
The country was locked down at the time, so like they took a big leap of faith of doing this.
Yeah.
And so like but when they got on the military boat, there were other pregnant women on the boat, and like the officer was like, "Are you guys crazy? Like doing this when you're in this condition? Do you want to die?"
Were they like is the military boat, like, is it from Hong Kong?
Yeah,
or?
it's Hong Kong
Oh,
military.
I see.
It's just that it's very scary. You don't know what you're expecting, right?
Because you don't know
Yeah,
which
yeah.
country this one's from.
So like they actually, I mean it happens not so often, but like I mean in the grand scheme of things quite often, that like they actually already had Vietnamese interpreters on the boats ready for this kind of stuff.
I see.
So like there's like, are you guys crazy? Like you want to die? Like they spoke to the Vietnamese.
Yeah.
So like then they boarded the boat, and they realized my mom was pregnant. So they immediately like they hadn't even they had just landed in Hong Kong. They took my dad to the refugee camp. But because my mom was pregnant, they took her immediately to Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Hong Kong with all the other refugees under refugee guard. So it was actually like a month after my dad landed in Hong Kong. He was in the refugee camp getting things sorted. He hadn't heard hadn't seen my mom since they landed in Hong Kong.
It's fucking terrifying.
And she was in the hospital, and she was only like lucky that other people were coming in and out back and forth. So because they kind of have that relationship of the people from the same neighborhood or people from the same city, it's like, oh, don't you remember me? I was like so and so's cousin. Like it's like my husband's here. Like if you see him, tell him I'm okay, kind of thing. So but like so my dad got like small news like that. But yeah, like, and then eventually my dad got to go because it was just because like they legitimately weren't, because Hong Kong was still, and the Queen Elizabeth Hospital was still territorially Hong Kong. The refugee zone was like it's political zone, that like it was a very weird political situation. You couldn't let them just cross until they were accepted as citizens into Hong Kong or whatever country they were going to. So that's why my dad couldn't freely walk back and forth between the two. But eventually he got news that everything was okay, and I was born there. And and at the time, like it was a lot of help from a lot of groups, like the monks. They came, and like they helped a lot of the families with like just helping them with paperwork, like, and navigating like the refugee application system. Like there was a lot of confusion because like I mean you just spent a month on a boat.
Yeah.
Like, and like now you're just suddenly in this city, like in a
You don't
camp
know
with like
anything
yeah,
there.
exactly, and you have no idea. So my mom was learning Chinese, my dad was learning Chinese to like so they can communicate with people. And this is actually this is the interesting part. So they started the process. They decided they wanted to try to go for Canada. The reason they chose Canada was because their friends had come here ahead of them. That was actually the friend that came back one of the first people that came back to Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so they decided, okay, we're gonna go. It seems like they say it's a good life there. They're talking to my parents got in touch with their friend in Canada, and she was arranging with the people that had helped her through their church group that helped them come to help my parents come. But and it was actually came down to one interview that my dad tells me, like with the Canadian embassy or the representative of the Canadian embassy, and it was he remembers the one question. There were a whole bunch of other random questions but he didn't really remember. But he said remember the one question that he feels that like was the difference for him was that the guy asked him, "What's the first thing you'll do when you get to Canada?" And my dad's question was immediate: find a job. Like I gotta support.
Immediately make money.
Find a job. Like contribute. And that was it. The stamp, and then it was all preparation and immigration paperwork. I mean, and to this day, my dad keeps the forms are all yellow now, but he keeps all the immigration paperwork from like that time. It was like it was all written in stuff he didn't understand. They just literally told him sign here, and he just signed, and like he didn't, and he was able to come here.
Yeah, I mean, like how many people, especially at this time, can like tell a story like that, right?
Yeah, it's really disjointed, but but I mean, like I said, like it's a story I know isn't unique, and it's one that I know a lot of kids will hear their parents tell about. But I guess it's one of those things that you appreciate more as you get older. When you're younger and you hear these stories, it's like it's disrespectful when I think about it. But it's like you feel a little annoyed having to hear history again, because to you it is history because you have to live through it. But as I get older, you develop an appreciation for it. With my parents, and more so nowadays because my dad's sharing a lot more now because he wants. I think he didn't want to tell me a lot when I was younger because he didn't want me to have, I guess, a bad impression of home.
Yeah.
Because despite all the things he like did to get out of there, it's still home to him, and he wants me to still think of it as home.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of it was him like not wanting that. But I mean, we're all older now.
Yeah.
Well, like I am. Like I don't think my dad ever bothered telling my brother half this stuff. But
well, I think it's like parents always kind of want you to have a good impression of your home country and stuff like that. But it is those kind of things, like, yeah, I guess, like, it's not unique in the sense that a lot of people had to go through it, like, back in that time, too, but then it's very unique to, like, people like me who hasn't heard about stuff like that before, because I remember when we just started dating, and then you told me, it's like, oh, yeah, it's like, my parents fled from Vietnam, from communism, like, and they were stuck on a boat for, like, a month, and then, like, they went to this country that they completely didn't know about, and then just, like, all these things happen, and then like to me at that time I was like, holy fuck.
But I guess I said it really matter-of-factly, huh?
Yeah, you said it as is like, of course, like you grew up hearing your parents' friends and people they knew like went through the exact same thing, but then it's like if I think of it in like me in their perspective, like if I went through something like that, I'm like, holy shit, like could I actually survive? It's like not necessarily, like I'm probably such a whiny little bitch now. It's like even one day on the boat I'm like shivering, I'm like I'm gonna die. Like,
I'm sure that was one day into the boat too for them, like
yeah, because like everything is so uncertain, and then like you're giving up like your life worth like of work for this thing that like you have a little bit of light for, like little bit of hope for.
Yeah, and in the end, my dad knows he made the right choice. It was actually interesting. He told me, how are we doing?
Not 30 minutes yet. 28.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, my dad actually told me. I have two like caveats left, but like the first one, I'll end with I guess a slightly happier one. My dad told me he kind of knew. He realized it's kind of rather funny to realize so late. A few years ago, him and my mom went to New York, and my dad realized his choice was like 100% right at the time. Was because when he was walking down the streets of New York with my mom, and this was the first time they'd ever been to New York. They'd invited my grandpa and grandma, like distant grandpa and grandma from
not blood related.
From Toronto to come with them to New York and like to walk around. And my dad turned to my mom one night as they were just walking through walking downtown there, and they're like, this is a place we heard about from people that read about it in a book,
Yeah.
that they had never been there when they were kids when we were in Vietnam. Now we're actually walking down this road that people wrote about in books as like the cultural capital of the world.
Yeah.
Like, it's a place that people dreamt about that and they never got to saw, and now we're walking here.
Yeah.
And he felt the same way as they got on a cruise to go to the Caribbean. And like, this is the place that people, like, you saw pictures of it in a book that your friend had, that he took from his dad when he wasn't supposed to, like, kind of thing. Like, it's like these kind of places that you look at and you're like, you don't know if they're real. All you know of them is like what gets written in the book at the time for them. That was the reality, and they got to live that they got to live that. So, and like, my dad like knew then that, like, and it's actually kind of silly that, like, it was only a few years ago that when he had this thought, he's like, yeah, I made the right choice to leave.
Yeah.
And so he he got to live quite a bit. Actually, now kind of a weird segue into like the last story I'll tell, kind of that time period. In Taiwan, I know they eat pumpkin, because pumpkin is like a vegetable you eat there. But do they eat the pumpkin leaves? Like, you know, the leaves that grow off the vine?
I think so.
Yeah, because like
yeah.
Okay, so I think you probably know what story I'm going to tell now, but like.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so in Vietnam, pumpkin's called zao bi, which is just pumpkin leaves. It's like it's a pretty. I guess it's a very low cost vegetable that people boil and they saute or fry now. It's a kind of a nostalgic taste for a lot of Vietnamese people, especially when they were younger. They didn't have a lot of money. But so a funny thing. So my grandpa on my mom's side, he hates this vegetable. He hated this vegetable, like.
I thought he hated pumpkin in general.
Pumpkin, everything to do with it.
Oh, okay.
He hated this vegetable, pumpkin, everything to do with it, because it was and there's a very good reason. So, when my mom was younger, like much before she knew my dad, like when she was still in like middle school, elementary school, I mentioned previously her family was quite well off. The reason for that was because my grandpa and her family had done a lot of business. They had actually done a lot of business with foreign companies and foreign groups, and like, so my mom's dad got to go to France, go to Paris, and like meet and do business. He would always my mom always remembered him in the early days, like he would never have his hair out of place. He would always like in the morning, he showed up at the breakfast table, he was already groomed, well dressed, nice button-up shirt, tie,
very presentable.
Everything. Very presentable guy, very well educated. He was educated in foreign universities, and he was a very well read guy. Like, my mom remembers, all the books that were always like forbidden by the government, he would have like a copy of them, and like he'd let her read them, because like it's like his privilege.
It's more knowledge.
Yeah, exactly. It's his privilege, and he'd seen the outside world. So unfortunately, when the communists took over, they had a very anti-foreign sentiment. So anybody that did business or was involved with people essentially outsiders was essentially they were thought of as potential traitors or traitors. So unfortunately, at that time, my mom's dad, he went to prison. He went to prison for several years, and in prison, you have to essentially the reason he hates pumpkin is because in prison that's essentially every meal, because to keep it low cost, what was rice and zao bi. When he came home from prison, he was very different. Of course, he was not the same person he was when he went into prison. But the one thing he will say is my mom remembers is I will never eat fucking pumpkin ever again.
Get that fucking devil's fruit away from me.
Well, it's actually a vegetable, isn't it?
Is it? I thought it was a fruit.
I could be wrong. I could be.
I could be wrong too.
Yeah, but so he was. so adamantly like so it was. I mean like that's why I meant like slightly let her. Like it's terrible he had to go to prison for all those years because of his association with foreign business. But that was just like a funny little caveat story. That
How many
like,
years was it? I remember it was like quite long.
that was like 5 or something years.
Yeah.
He lost a lot of his life.
Like
in
it was
prison.
just like one day your grandma returned and then like he wasn't there, right?
Or no, I think they came and arrested him.
Oh, so your grandma witnessed it?
Probably like I said, these are the things my mom doesn't really talk about, and
Yeah.
because we're not very a lot of the thing is like I'm not really close to a lot of my mom's side of the family because of other reasons, but
Yeah.
so I really only got to hear these things from her, and I mean I guess I don't really get to hear these things from her anyways anymore, so yeah, but yeah, so that's just like the little side caveat story that I'll hopefully end my stuff with on a lighter note. So yeah, don't fucking bring up pumpkin.
Around
Yeah.
around Grandpa Nun.
Yeah, he will not. Yeah, to the day he died, I don't think he ever ate another bite of pumpkin.
Oh yeah, that's understandable.
Yeah, my grandma was happy to oblige him for that.
Yeah. Give the man anything but pumpkin.
Yeah.
He'll be happy.
Yeah, but luckily they were able to recover after that time period. Like, I mean, all his sons became dentists and things like that. So the family is quite okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a shame he did all that stress. I'm sure like made him pass away a lot sooner than he should have.
Oh yeah, like you wouldn't know what kind of condition he lived through.
He passed away before my dad's dad did. So he passed away like well before my mom, before it was a possibility for my mom to even fly back there.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so that I mean it's a shame, but it's the truth.
Yeah.
Mm.
So just
yeah.
thought back then.
Yeah, so I guess that's the story of that's sort of the story of my life.
Story of your parents' life and their legacy.
Yeah. Hope. I mean, like I guess for me, it's like it's things that happen, but they are part of who we are, and
I think
why.
it's a very important thing to know.
I
Like
mean,
these kind of histories, it's definitely like, it's just like any difficulties that my parents went through or my grandparents had to go through. Like I would want to know because it makes me value more of the stuff that I have now, and then like pretty much be grateful of everything that's around me and like that they work so hard to like fight for us to have a better life here.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess that's it.
Yeah.
That's it for me.
Thanks for sharing it to everyone that's listening.
Hope it wasn't boring. Oh, actually, sidebar things that people always ask me, regardless of this. My dad was in the artillery team. That's that question always comes up.
But by the way, his dad is like the sweetest man. So then like me just having like me listening to you about like what your dad did and all that stuff. Like I'm just like, oh, that's so heartbreaking. It's like because at that time you don't have a freaking choice. Like you either do that or like something might happen to your family or just like there's no way for you to live there properly. Yeah.
And I mean, for him it was a national service, so it was his duty to go. So
Yeah.
but yeah, so yeah, hope it was interesting. Hope it wasn't boring. But yeah, thanks for listening, guys.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.